I'm Mike Giles. The wonderful lady next to me is Katherine Duran, dedicated mom, homeschooling mom, Liberty Crusader. And this is Mr. Aurthur Ringwalt, student of the Constitution and also a Libertarian Crusader. And there's a lot of talk about the drought here in California. And there's a lot of talk back and forth about everything that's going on. There's a gentleman known as Victor Davis Hanson that's grew up in the Central Valley, and he's written lots about it. So I'll just kind of be quiet and let one of our wonderful panelists.
Yes, California has a big problem. Ever since California was founded, Mark Twain once came out to California. Mark Twain is a big wit, as you know, and one of the things that Mark Twain said was that out back east, I believe it was, they have fights over whiskey. Ever heard this before? But out west, we have fights over water. So that's been good. This kind of thing has been going on a long, long time. And as it is now, California would not have such a big problem with water if water were private property. So if water were private property, which is private property is very important, comes out in the Fifth Amendment, discusses property rights, and even before then, it was discussed by the founding fathers that water were people's property. Then people would value it and would not waste it. We wouldn't waste, perhaps we wouldn't waste water, perhaps having runs for salmon. Perhaps the farmers as it is take about 80, I think something like 85% of all the waters for farming. And you wonder why they have all these, even the Sacramento area, we have these big rice farms. And perhaps the water could be for better use. So that's basically the problem, is that if people valued water and wouldn't waste it, then we would have less of a water problem. If water got scarce, then you have to put up the price of water a little bit. And if water becomes plentiful, you got to put it down a bit. It might be inconvenient to some people, but in the long run, we have make better use of our water resources.
Well, yeah. I do know that when our ancestors came out here to California, it's more or less considered kind of a desert area historically, and there was never enough water to sustain large populations of the indigenous peoples like there is in the Midwest, because the water always just ran out to the ocean. And so our ancestors of 100 years ago and a little less than that started building the infrastructure like dams to make reservoirs, and they slowly built enough reservoirs so they could have big cities like San Francisco, and they just kept working away building these things, and we stopped building dams back in about the 70s, and the population though has kept growing. So anyway, that seems to be a problem that's building, and
we have one of the major problems that we have with water is a perception that we have, and I believe is a manufactured perception of water problem. It's a manufactured water problem. We have a perception, people perceive that there's a water problem because we have a complicit media that perpetuates the notion that we have this major water problem. But I think that one of the problems that we face right now is the demolition of dams. And so that water will end up going right out to the ocean. And so I think that's something that we need to really kind of pay a little bit more attention to. What are the farmers saying? What are those farmers talking about? How are they treated by the government? What are the facts behind, each of those. We were talking about 85% of the farmers, and how better to have the government swoop in and save us from all kinds of things than to manufacture a crisis, and that crisis happens to be right now water.
Well, now, one reason it hasn't rained for a few seasons, and there's almost no snowpack, and the environmentalist people insist on not having any more dams. So guess what happens? There's going to be a El Nino weather that's probably will be coming up, might be huge amounts of rainfall, and where does the water go? The water goes all the way down to the ocean because they don't build enough dams.
Yeah, I remember.
And that is one problem. So perhaps if people valued water a bit more, then maybe may up the more individuals or corporations to build dams, or maybe even better, we have a lot of water up 90 miles west of Sacramento. There's a big ocean out there, and no, it's expensive. But in San Diego, they have built a huge saltwater treatment plant. And we have to, sometimes we're going to have to do that. California keeps getting more water, more people, wastewater. Another thing we could do, if they don't do it, is build more water treatment facilities. But I think environmentalists don't like that either because it hurts the fish or something like that.
Yeah, well, I remember reading responses from people from the Midwest that came out here, and they're absolutely shocked to just watch all this water just go right out to the sea.
Right. That's right.
And they're actually horrified because they can't afford to do that in the Midwest.
Right.
And there's another kind of thing that I heard at a Libertarian get-together. It was a very long talk by a Capitol insider, who I won't name at the moment, but he described in great detail how the California State Legislature kind of merged with the California State Water Control Board, I think is what it's called, Water Resources Control Board, how they have systematically, for a 25-year period, diverted, pocketed, given to their friends 100% of all the money that's designed, that was delegated for building water reservoirs. So now the reservoirs aren't there and the money's gone.
Big surprise.
And so there's a lot of people that aren't talking about that.
And all we need is more money. All we need is more money, right? And that'll fix it all, right?
But the students that Aurthur and I work with in the education, oh yeah, they're the ones that are going to pay. They're 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. They're going to shoulder the burden while all of our political office holders will no longer be there. So there's shocking things going on, and the corruption in our state government is, money-wise, really exceeds. We hear about Detroit, but compared to Detroit, California is very big. California is a very big place compared to Detroit, so there's a lot more money getting pocketed, I guess you could say.
That's right.
I don't know. I noticed that also that the San Bernardino thing happened, and there seems to be a big surge of firearms purchasing going on.
Right.
And that seems to be something that's caught a few people's attention.
Despite the efforts of the president, I think this was a huge opportunity again for him to try to. It's a gun control. It turns out to be a gun control issue, and the shootings. Anytime we have one of these shootings, it always ends up turning out to be another opportunity to, for a gun grab. So I'm glad. It's wonderful because horrifying that this is something that happened. And especially in the way that it did around the holidays and all, but it's wonderful that people see this as an opportunity to protect themselves and to go out and purchase guns, exercise their unalienable right to defend themselves. And so it's really shocking that that the number of people that are fearful of guns. One of the things that was really funny the other day, I actually am training for an NRA certification. Oh. And so I'm learning a lot more about guns. And, I in some of the efforts that we work really hard on, a lot of times people think, what will we do if the government comes to our house and wants to take our guns, or they want to, let's say force vaccinate our children at some point. These types of things. What would we do? How will we handle that? And I just tell people, if you are not prepared to protect yourself, for example, if the government does want to come to your house and vaccinate your child, you had better be prepared. This is a life or death situation. If you believe that that's something that could potentially kill your child, which it actually can, is your child risking? Are you risking permanent injury at the hands of the government by force vaccinating? Yes, that's a possibility. Is it a great possibility? I don't know. It's a small possibility. But when you have that kind of a risk, and you have the government coming to your house and forcing something on you against your will, this is the reason we have the Second Amendment. This is the reason that we have an unalienable right or an unalienable right to protect ourselves. So, I think that we really should think very carefully about arming ourselves, whether it's the government or whether it's an intruder.
Okay, the sheriff is encouraging people, and the sheriff of Sacramento County, that is encouraging people to get concealed carry weapons permits.
Sure.
And I personally, I practice at least once a month. I try to go to the shooting range and practice.
Great. That's great.
Yeah, well, basically from the beginning of time, there's been emperors, potentates, pharaohs, kings, queens, and they have their rich landed elite and their police forces and their army. And historically speaking, for 99.999% of mankind's time on earth, the people were the servants. People did what they were told. If they didn't, they got to die.
Right.
Now, the first time that the common person became free from government gunmen, if I can use that word, was the American Revolution of 1776. And the King's gunmen murdered many of our patriots and a lot of the founding fathers who we don't know because they're dead. Their families murdered, their farms burned, and their animals killed to scare people. So that is why the founding fathers put in the Second Amendment.
The Second Amendment dated before then in the British Bill of Rights. I think it's 1689. It also mentioned right to carry arms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's really part of British law. It's a British. They may not have it now, but in those days they had. It's part of British common law tradition, and it is a natural right. No government can take away natural rights.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them, and many others, most of these are Bill of Rights, natural rights that no government can take away if it wants to remain in a free country.
Yeah,
So one
the-
way to determine this country is free or not, whether or not we have the Bill of Rights is still in force, and it includes the Second Amendment.
Yeah, the First Amendment and then the Second Amendment, they go together. You have your right to speak, your mind, the freedom to speak, and then your home is your castle.
We have the reason that we came to America in the first place was for freedom of religion, which happens to be the first provision of the First Amendment, and of course we have our freedom of speech, and yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I heard this kind of more recently, but actually Thomas Jefferson owes his life to an American patriot who was out drinking like a lot of the guys did, I guess, in those days when the British murder squad went out to, and everybody knew where the Patriots were going to be and meeting and all that. So this man had to crash through the forest, permanently scarring his face and his horse's face. But he got to Thomas Jefferson's place a few minutes before the Brits did. Mm-hmm. And that was 1771. So Thomas Jefferson would have been one of those murdered patriots had that man not
Had it not been for right.
managed to get there ahead of time. The British murder squads were very, I mean, as I speak with people from India and stuff, they're familiar with that too. They understand that the King's men were pretty doggone mean.
Yeah, okay, Gandhi once said that one of the worst things about British rule, I don't quite know, one of the worst things about British rule is it's preventing the Indians from having firearms. And it might even be worse than the salt tax. That was fairly bad.
Sure. Yeah, they didn't, and that's why, I mean, the American Second Amendment came from the British murder squads, Mm-hmm. So in order to have your home as your castle, you're not only free, but you're also responsible for maintaining that freedom. You can't just have it, just endlessly passed. You have to earn it every generation.
That's right.
Yeah, your home is your castle, by the way, is part of California law. And if somebody invades inside of your house, is inside the living area of your house, that doesn't include the patio or the garage.
Okay.
Then you have more of a right to defend yourself, might even shoot the guy. Well, you have to try to avoid that. First you have to try to avoid it and go away. But if you can't still protect yourself, then you're going back in the corner and the guy's still there, then you have the right to shoot him. But of course you can't shoot somebody running away.
Oh, of
Even
course.
in your home,
yeah.
I don't believe. I'm not quite sure about that. It's a bit subjective, but your home is your castle in this state.
Yeah.
As long as it's not your patio or your garage or in the yard, but it's got to be inside the house.
Yeah.
And
Well-
that's an English common law tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So I think the right to defend yourself extends beyond just the limitation of your home. It actually, I know, at least for me, my rights, like for example, my rights to free speech, my rights to exercise my religion, all of the rights that I possess that are beyond. We're not just talking about the Bill of Rights, because we have our rights are infinite. They're not just the ones that are listed in the Constitution for the government not to infringe on. Those are just the foundational natural rights.
Natural rights.
Right.
Natural rights are for the government cannot infringe on a natural right if we're going to remain a free society, and that's based on John Locke, L-O-C-K-E. And John Locke was a big influence on the founding fathers. And John Locke was a British philosopher living, I think, around 1700. So the founding fathers were very kept up to date on this type of political philosophy.
Sure. And so, anyway, as I was saying, our rights are infinite, and so when our rights are being violated, then we have to take measures. If my life is in danger, my right to exercise, my right to protect myself extends. I mean, it's wherever I happen to be. So,
We continue, so a
Yeah,
lot of people,
exactly.
and a lot of people in Sacramento County, the sheriff is encouraging people to have concealed carry weapons permits. Unfortunately, you cannot have one in the school. You cannot have one in a college campus, and that is a new law that was passed by the Democratic legislature. So that becomes quite a few places where you cannot have a concealed carry weapon. It's in
Right.
trouble. And unfortunately, most of these shootings, these crazy shootings, seem to be taking place in places where are gun-free zones. And such as
That's right, because
such as San Bernardino, as one example.
sure.
Yeah.
There's no one there that is armed and prepared to defend themselves and others. And that's again, that goes back to the fear. We have complicit media that is going along with the government's, wish for a gun grab, to take our guns, to disarm us. And so when that happens, we have people out there that are, obviously, it's not even in their consciousness that they want to be necessarily be carrying. I really, when I speak about guns and about being prepared and what happens if someone comes to your door and insists on vaccinating your child, for example, this is something that came up, and I say you had better be prepared, because, like I would say, anyone's welcome to come to my door and vaccinate my child at the end of my shotgun.
Well, for you have a
I
shotgun,
will say,
I have one too.
and it doesn't mean that I want to blow somebody away. It just means that I am not going to have someone else take away whether vaccines are safe as water or if they are, poison. It's up to me to decide. This is my property. My child is my responsibility. I will defend my child, and the minute that we do acquiesce or give in to these things is when the government says, hey, you know what, we can take over and we can muscle our way in. This is not the role of government to disarm us, to take away our right to defend ourselves. So when we have people that are out there like in San Bernardino, that could have been taken care of very quickly. I hate to say that, but that could have been taken care of very quickly.
Oh, yeah, very.
If somebody
Line of sight.
were armed.
That's right, if they had been armed. And, but we're fearful of that. So
I think that was a gun-free zone.
But
oh, yeah.
There's a series of articles written by this amazing woman called Emily. She works in Washington, D.C., and the article's called Emily Gets Her Gun. And she
Saw that.
battled the government of the city of Washington, D.C. for years to get her gun, and all of her female compatriots also began the battle, and eventually, after paying thousands of dollars worth of battling against the city, which also, by the way, had a rule that these women are not allowed to carry mace to protect themselves.
Oh, really?
I hadn't heard that one.
Because apparently the government of the city of Washington, D.C. likes criminals so much that they don't even want women to be able to protect themselves with mace.
Wow.
So, and surely not with a gun. But I saw this long C-SPAN show where Emily herself was 8 miles away in Virginia at a black-owned gun shop, and the murder rates 8 miles away were like 1/50th of the murder rate in Washington, D.C. And these guys were rural people, they understood, and so everybody was deeply respectful of their firearms, the danger, the use of, the safety.
That's right.
And so Emily eventually got her gun, and her compatriots are, and they themselves, because they put this big battle out, are safer.
Absolutely. I saw her. I didn't see the interview, but I saw her.
In Virginia, they allow people to have open carry in Virginia.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, I used to live there. Virginia wouldn't put up with this stuff.
So when we have a Second Amendment that says the right of the people, interestingly enough, I just read something the other day about someone mentioning the Second Amendment, and there are two parts of the Second Amendment. So we're talking about the militia, I suppose.
Okay.
And then the second half, something about the first and second half. And I didn't realize that there was a first and second half. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Right.
So why is it that we say we can't, we're not allowed?
Because they say we're going to make it as quickly because we have to end the show in a minute. They say that the only reason we have guns is because of a militia, and the militia is a national guard, and that's the gun grab. That's the argument that gun grabbers use. So
And the truth is-
anybody can join. We can join a militia almost any time we want. Maybe not in this room, but we can start a militia of ourselves and get a few people together and some firearms.
That's
and
what
have
the
a
militia
Right.
is. The
That's what it
militia
means.
is able-bodied adults, what was it, 16 to 85 or something? But it's, I think if you're fit and you're able at 85 or 95, you can consider yourself militia, because that's what the intention was. That's what the language meant at the time, is the people. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Okay, well, we appreciate
Yeah.
we
well,
appreciate your people listening to this.
Yeah, anyway, I just want both of you guys to know how nice it was to be able to exchange with such great and talented folks.
Thanks for having us.
And I would certainly like to thank the Libertarian Party for having the Libertarian CounterPoint and to allow us to speak.
Thank you.
And
Thanks for having us.
I'll throw in that back in the end of the 1800s, Annie Oakley could hit a thrown up silver dollar as she's riding by on her horse. So, like, people have talent everywhere, including you two.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So
Thanks, Mike.
the people of the Libertarian Party have shown themselves to be gracious folks that allow all sorts of people to speak, to have a view, which is the whole part of the American tradition, to let everybody have a voice. And that's why our legislatures are supposed to act. Somehow or other, maybe they're not as much as we'd like them to, but
That's true.
the Libertarian Party is holding up that American tradition of letting everybody have a voice, letting everybody be, and you two really made my day better simply by...
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thanks so much, Mike. Thank you.
Okay.